welcome to the Mac for the Blind Spring 2023 course number 3. This is going to be an interesting session for me because I've never done this particular topic in the past. So I've kind of piecemealed it together because it turns out there is a lot more in-depth stuff than I initially believed there to be. So this is all about privacy and security, and I'm going to try to cover both iOS and Mac in the course of this session. So I'm not going to go down rabbit holes too much here, or at least attempt not to go through every single aspect of privacy and security as I go through the settings, but I'm going to try to talk about as many things as possible because there's really been, I guess, a great deal of confusion as to what you should have turned on, what you should not turn on, or what can you have turned on. Are you truly safe and secure using Apple devices, or is it just a smokescreen that Apple likes to talk about, et cetera, et cetera? So let's first take a general step back here before I get into specific devices, and let's just speak about Apple in general. I'm not going to compare to other companies. You can make your own judgments as to how they handle privacy. Some of you know my personal feelings about some of those companies, particularly one that rhymes with Google, and how they, their questionable practices. But when it comes to Apple, they have made it publicly known over and over again about their commitment to user privacy and security. And a lot of the stuff that goes on with, when you're using iCloud and so forth, Siri, it is machine specific in that the stuff happens on your Mac or on your iPhone or your iPad and is not shared necessarily with Apple. In fact, when there is specific things that Apple would like you to share with them, you have explicit right to decide whether you want that to happen. So, for example, the Siri history stuff, sharing those kinds of details to help Apple improve Siri, analytics and other data on both Mac and iOS. You have the right to decide what types of analytic data, crash reports, etc., that you want to share either directly with Apple or with third-party developers of applications. So let's start with the whole question of iCloud. iCloud is obviously Apple's cloud services that has become extraordinarily complex and powerful as the years have passed. And it's gotten to the point of being relatively seamless. Back in the day, Cliff probably remembers, the early days of iCloud, there were a lot of glitches and things didn't necessarily sync well and did not necessarily work as smoothly as Apple would like, was kind of claiming at the time. But I have to be perfectly honest, and it's not coming from the perspective of being an Apple fanboy or anything like that. I just find that iCloud has really turned into a very smooth and machine-like operation where everything just syncs over to all my devices. I can access my iCloud drive. I can pick up my documents on different devices and edit them. I've done iCloud sharing, both with documents and with files and so forth. Cliff and I, in fact, have a shared folder that we use for iCloud Drive to make it easier for each other to send each other, different files instead of having to use like Dropbox or something, or, some kind of a file service. So to me, I think that, iCloud has come a very long way. As far as security goes, there's a lot of redundancy that Apple utilizes. There's a lot of stuff that goes on beneath the chassis of your iPhone and your Mac. I will say this much: if you're really that interested, there is a lot of Apple knowledge base articles on how a lot of things like FileVault works, for example, for the Mac, and disk encryption and different types of tokens, and how it compares from Mac OS 13 Ventura to back in Mac OS 11, as far back as as Mavericks and so forth, and Catalina go, prior to switching to Mac OS 12 and 13. So the length and extent that Apple goes to protect your privacy and your data, really, at the moment, and again, these things tend to change, and who knows, what kind of conversation we might have 5 years from now, 10 years from now. But as of, this date in May of 2023, May 9th, Apple's commitment and their their gestures and the things that they do to protect your privacy is pretty amazing. And iCloud, there's still people I run, I interact with, both clients and just people in passing who drop emails through the website and ask some questions. There's still this air of paranoia that some people have. We're not trusting cloud services, and they just have this belief that, well, anybody can access their data regardless of what, is claimed by the company. And, I guess if you want to take the sci-fi, conspiracy theory point of view and believe that, there's somebody hiding in every shadow out there, and you want to believe that somebody's spying on you, if you think that you're that important to the universe that, the government or whoever else is going to be spying specifically on you, that's fine.
Wouldn't that come down to common sense, though? I mean, why
Yeah,
would you
you would
put something?
think. You would think.
I
I
mean,
mean,
that just goes along with phishing emails. I mean, if you don't know the sender, if you don't recognize the website, the link, don't click on it. So, I mean, that's just my opinion.
yeah, and that's just it. It's common sense stuff. And and sometimes there's this people point at some of the incidents that happened with iCloud, where you had celebrities who had nude photos, they were keeping in their photo stream, that some fan managed to, hack their account and download and spread throughout the internet. The thing that is not publicized, because the media just loves to run with a story without actually giving details, or before there are any details actually out there. But what it comes down to is just what Cliff said: common sense. That starts with a password. If you are a celebrity and you have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of fans, and there is going to be a percentage of, let's just say, not well people among those fans who are maybe obsessed with you, you might want to make your passwords a little bit harder to figure out. And what it came down to, from my understanding and from things that I've read, is these celebrities used passwords that fans who knew their lives, knew their backgrounds, were able to figure out and guess, to, birthdays or pets' names and stuff like that. And they were able to kind of just patiently put combinations together, because that's what obsessed fans do. And they were able to hack these people's accounts. So, the first lesson here is your passwords. Doesn't matter what device you're using, it doesn't matter what service you're using, banking, etc. Be aware of the passwords you use. And, I understand most people, and, I am guilty of this. There is a certain combination of things that I use for most of my passwords, simply because I'm 55 years old and it's becoming more difficult for me to remember. Though I am starting to take a page out of some of my clients' books, as far as coming up with an encrypted document that I'm going to start, writing down different passwords for services I use, just because I need to start changing up a little bit. One of the things you'll see that Apple will have, particularly if you look into either on your Mac or your iPhone, there is the passwords feature, menu, whatever you want to call it. And when you look at the individual, you have to unlock those settings, either, on the Mac, it's going to be using, your system password, or if you have Touch ID set up on your Mac, if it's your iDevice, it's going to be the passcode or Face ID or Touch ID, depending on your model. You can then see all of the passwords and, login information for various accounts. And there are security blurbs that will let you know if those passwords are known to be part of a data breach or some kind of security problem. And it gives you the option to change those passwords right there and then. And that's up to you. And people think I make this stuff up. I can't tell you how many times I have been asked by clients and people who just use the contact form on my website, wanting to know if they should immediately change their passwords when they get those warnings from Apple. And some people panic. My philosophy is it comes down to you. Do you feel that where are you using these passwords? Obviously, if it's banking, anything that involves your financial security, you might want to think twice. Maybe you want to change that password. Maybe you want to change up that password for your banking login information every, 3 months or 6 months or something like that. Things like that is entirely up to you. Those warnings are just there to warn you. They just want to let you know that, hey, Apple knows that this password you're using is part of a data breach. You might want to think about what you use it for. And then it comes down to your sense of security, and again, this is just me personally. I'm not saying everybody should follow my philosophy because I don't know if I'm being foolish or not. But a lot of times I look at this and say, who cares about John Panarese? Am I that important that people are going to need to, particularly pick on me? I mean, if it's banking and stuff, yes, absolutely. I will change my passwords. I don't want people, even by accident, to be able to, to get into my financial stuff. But other things where it's really not that important to me, if somebody gets into my account, it's not like enough for me. I have a lot of other things I have to remember and keep track of every day. So I try to kind of, I just kind of play the odds sometimes, I guess you say, just because it just seems like it's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but that's up to you as the individual user. So, the point here is that security does start with you. And as Cliff said, common sense, just think about how you do things, how obviously you make passwords, even starting with your Mac and your iPhone. Do you use a passcode? Do you use Face ID? Do you use Touch ID on your phone or your iPad? Do you use Touch ID, or do you have a really good password? Do you have the login window set for your Mac? Do you use FileVault? These types of things you need to consider, especially with iDevices that you take and laptop computers that you take with you to places. God forbid you get the thing stolen. I had this happen to my girlfriend. Not that it was stolen. She left her computer on a flight 5 or 6 years ago. Did not have a password, did not turn on Find My Mac at the time. Nothing like that. It was just stupid, for the lack of a way of saying it. I was kind of ashamed considering how much I lectured her on security and stuff. She learned a very hard lesson, though, because now with her Mac, she has everything up the wazoo turned on, FileVault, a really good, strong system password, Find My turned on, etc. So, these are the things you have to think about: your environment. Where are you taking the computer? Are you a student? Do you go to a college? You don't want to leave your computer unattended. If you leave your computer unattended, make sure you have it so that when the screensaver kicks in, you need to have a password for somebody to unlock the computer. You want to have Find My turned on all your devices. You want to use iCloud. Again, there's this sense of paranoia out there where people won't even use an Apple ID to log into iCloud on their devices because they think that Apple spies on them. But iCloud has so many positives, so many advantages, Find My being one of the biggest ones. How many times have you read or heard in the news about, items being recovered, stolen items? I just read an article recently where somebody lost their AirPods on a flight and they used Find My, and an airport worker basically took the AirPods home, didn't bring them to the lost and found, just brought them home with them, and they were traced to that person's, house, and the police showed up. So simple things like turning on Find My can go a long way. And
I was
it's
just about
even,
to say, there was an article about people considering using air tags to find stolen cars, and I had to text my oldest daughter because she's been doing that since the air tags first came out because she shares her car with her sister, and she wanted to know where her car was all the time. So she hid an air tag in her glove compartment. So if her
yes,
sister said, "I'm at the gas station," she said, "You're lying because my app tells me that you're halfway across town. So where are you really at?"
yeah,
So
exactly.
so I had to tease her. I said you should have patented that because now Apple's thinking about doing it.
Yeah, and I've read a couple of things about that, and I've had a few friends that put air tags in their car, and and hidden in the glove compartment, in certain things that they carry with them, even their keys and stuff in the house. I mean, how many times do you just put something down when you're in a rush and you don't remember where it is? And and I've seen it, like my niece is the queen of forgetting where she has her AirPods, her iPhone in my house. How many times did I have to have her go use Find My and send a sound to that device so she could find it in the house, and she's sighted. So, Find My has, it used to be Find My iPhone, but it's now generally called Find My, and it's going to be found in iCloud settings on both the iPhone and the Mac. And what you want to do is make sure it's turned on. And what it allows you to do, even though you're blind, I know people say, well, the GPS isn't going to do me good because I can't read a map. No, it still gives you the physical address where something is located. It also allows you to send a sound effect, play a sound from the device. And if worse comes to worse and it's stolen, you can actually physically erase the computer or erase the phone or the iPad if it's got a lot of personal data on it. It's still locked because that's another part of Apple's security, is that you have it locked still, that the person still would need your Apple ID and password to be able to unlock the device and wipe it to sell it on eBay or through some other nefarious means. So you definitely want to turn on Find My on all your devices.
Settings, head, search,
And
dictate,
we are
John
going
Panarese,
to
Apple
go,
ID, dictate, search field,
let's go with
dictate,
Apple
button,
ID
John
first.
Panarese,
I just
Apple
want to
ID,
show you guys.
account image, John Panarese, name, phone number, password and secure, payment and shipping, subscriptions, iCloud, 250 gig,
So we're going to
iCloud
go to
Plus, 111.9 gig,
iCloud.
iCloud Mail, Apple ID, iCloud Plus, manage account, apps using photos, iCloud Drive, iCloud Mail, passwords and show all, device backups, iCloud Backup, iCloud Plus, private relay, hide my email, custom email domain, share with family, manage your plan, advanced data protect, access iCloud data on the web, access your mail, contacts, calendar,
So
logo
you
of
have
advanced
all
manage your plan share with family button custom email domain hide my email button
hide my email, custom domain. There's a lot of security things here in iCloud. Now, again, what extent you have to go to with this stuff, that's up to you. Some people are very, nervous, or I don't want to use the word paranoid because that becomes negative connotations, but some people are a little bit more concerned than others, and they want everything kind of almost like you're in stealth mode when it comes to the cyber world. So they want to hide everything. And that's up
private
to
relay
you.
off button iCloud
So
Plus heading
they have, and by the way, some of these things only work if you subscribe to the iCloud Plus plan. So keep in mind what you're hearing in my phone may not show up on yours if you're not an iCloud Plus subscriber. I guess they consider that to be benefits of being an iCloud subscriber.
iCloud backup on. Device backups.
So let
Apple
me
ID.
just go.
Back
What I
button.
really wanted to go
Apple
show
ID.
you
iCloud.
is
Media and
private
Find My
location,
Family Share. John's iPhone 4.
privacy and
Apple TV.
security.
Bedroom. Home. Settings. Back button.
Let me just
Settings.
get there.
Notification. Sounds. Focus. Screen time. General. Control center. Display and home screen. Accessibility. Wallpaper. Siri and search. Face ID and passcode. Emergency SOS. Exposure notification. Battery. Privacy and App Store. Privacy and security. Location services.
So privacy
on. Button.
and security. This is a place you want to start and take a, kind of a gander at, because sometimes people completely overlook it. Now, location services gets a bad rap, particularly back in the day, and I guess maybe to some extent today, but certainly back in the day when everybody was looking to save or preserve battery life on their devices. One of the things that a lot of people used to advise, quote unquote, was going into location services and turning location services off of various apps. Of course, if you feel that an application should probably not know where you are, it has no business, or you don't need it to be that important, then of course, turn it off. But be careful about, just indiscriminately going into location services and turning off everything, because there are apps like weather and such that generally need to know where you are to be useful.
Tracking button.
Now, tracking. I'm going to
Allow
double
apps to
tap
request
on
to track
this.
on.
So
Double tap to allow apps to ask to track your activity across other companies' apps and websites. When this is off, all new app tracking requests are automatically denied. Learn more. Allow apps to request to track on.
So you
Double
want
tap
this
to toggle setting.
on. You want to be notified if an app wants to track you. So this is definitely one that you want to keep on. And I know some people will want to turn it off because you get all these nagging messages from your phone anytime you install a new app, that you got to go through all these hoops like, notification center and track. You want to know if an app is tracking you, particularly if it's an app that has no business doing that.
Allow apps to ask to track your privacy and security. Privacy.
go
Nearby
back
interaction.
here.
Nearby interaction. Local network button. Bluetooth button.
So you have, security for all
Photos
these different items.
Reminders button.
That, are going
Calendars
to
button. Contacts
use,
button. Tracking
location
button.
services of some kind.
Location services on button.
So I'm going to go into location services.
Location alerts button.
So like location alerts.
Location services uses GPS, Bluetooth, and crowdsourced Wi-Fi hotspot and cell tower locations to determine your approximate location. About locations, location services settings also apply to your Apple Watch.
So this is just
share my location button.
Here's share my location. So if you ever find yourself in a situation, sometimes people, again, they think this is a bad thing, that you shouldn't, but sometimes you want to share your location, not with the whole world maybe, but with specific people. And if you have kids, you'll want them to share their location with you, so you have an idea of where they are. Sometimes when you're blind and you go out someplace, you're traveling by yourself, maybe you want to have other people in your family have your location to know where you are, just in case there is an issue. So, don't always assume that it's a bad thing to share your location.
This iPhone is being used for app clips button. Action, requested your location in the past
so
while
then
using
you're going to
button.
find apps that have requested your location. So you can kind of get a summary by double tapping on, the individual app, and you can find out why it requested your location.
Amazon Alexa requested your location in the past while using button.
So a lot of times it's set to only track you if you're using the app. So for example, with the Amazon app, obviously it's going to want to know where you are. If there's a location or something nearby or whatever. I mean, I don't generally care because I usually just ship stuff to my house.
Privacy and security back button.
But that's up to you. So
privacy.
Of course,
Tracking
I can't
button.
find
Contacts
what I actually
button.
wanted
Calendars
to show you
lockdown
guys.
mode off button.
Okay, then you have lockdown. This is at the bottom of the screen. Lockdown mode. if you know that your phone, that you might be under any kind of an attack from somebody, a cyber attack or anything like that, where you think somebody might have gotten personal information from you, you basically can lock everything down on your phone.
Security, heading. App privacy report, button.
App privacy report.
App privacy report, records date, privacy and security, back button. App privacy report, heading. Share, button. App privacy report, records data and sensor access, app and website network activity, and the most frequently contacted domains.
So
Learn
this
more,
gives
link.
you an idea
Double
of
tap to
what
activate embedded.
app privacy reports. This lets you kind of know if an app might be up to something no good.
Data and sensor access, heading. Weather, 2 minutes ago. Health, 2 minutes ago. Middle dot contacts, button.
So you can find out with these individual apps with the, why, what they've actually done that might be a privacy issue for you. It's not something to get panicked about, because the vast 99.9% of this is pretty harmless stuff and is just letting you know that something's going on. But it's never a bad idea once in a while to poke around in here and just see what your different apps are, quote unquote, what they're up to.
Fitness, 5 minutes. Calendar, 5 minutes ago. Middle dot contacts, button.
So it tells you, what the app, what aspect of your phone feature or whatever that some of these apps have actually, wanted to have access to. Now, remember, when you install apps, you get these splash screens, sometimes warnings from your phone that you're going to be giving this app permission to do certain things. So, for example, with Zoom, you're going to be asked to allow, Zoom to use the microphone, to use the camera. So pay attention when you get these app alerts that come up that kind of tell you, hey, you might want to be aware of this, but this app is going to, wants to use blah, 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 notification center, location, whatever. So again, let's, kind of not to keep beating a dead horse here, but common sense, think about what you're being asked and you make the decision as the user whether you want that to happen or not.
Privacy and security, back button. Privacy, analytics and Apple advertising, button. App privacy report, button. Apple analytics and improvements, button.
So here's the analytics and improvements, what I was talking about, where you can decide whether you want, Apple to be contacted with any crashes and stuff like that, or third party, developers to be known if their apps crash and get a report from your device.
Protect your personal safety by staying aware of which people, safety check, button.
And then there's your safety check. All of this stuff is at the bottom of location services. So past all of the apps that have requested your location, you can simply do a 4-finger single tap at the bottom of the screen and then work your way backwards to the left if you want to make it easier for yourself.
As apps request access, they focus, button.
Okay.
Motion and fitness, button.
So again, I'm just going backwards here. So these are the different apps that, with locations.
Settings, back button.
Services.
Privacy and secure. Settings, back button. Settings, emergency SOS, Face ID and passcode, button.
So, this is general, iPhone's privacy and security. Now, keep in mind that apps like Safari, Mail, even using your Wi-Fi network, by default, as of iOS 16, Apple, with your Wi-Fi, you use a private network. So what that basically means is anytime you connect to a Wi-Fi network, it changes your MAC address. So if people are trying to track your device, they can't, because it's a random MAC address that anytime you join, even if you rejoin a network, it doesn't use the same MAC address, media access control, not Mac computer. Some people think MAC address is specific to Apple Macs. They're not. Even Windows PCs use a MAC address and media access control.
Now, would you recommend or be against somebody turning that off? Because there are certain routers that
there are certain. You just kind of beat me to the punch.
Okay, I was just going to ask because some people think it's safe to turn that off because they don't want their router identifying their device as something new every time they leave and come home.
Yeah, so you can make that decision on your home network. You can, but Also keep in mind certain networks, certain enterprise, they call it, it's basically enterprise networks where you get, a specific password to join that network and user ID for a business or whatever. They want you to have the same MAC address anytime you join their network. So a system administrator may ask you to turn that off. So the way you do that is you go into, I'm going to just go here.
Settings, heading, wallpaper, button, settings, search, dictate, John Panarese, airplane mode, Wi-Fi, FOSRXD, Wi-Fi,
So I'm going to
switch
go
button,
into Wi-Fi.
selected,
So if you
FOSRXD7C,
flick
secure network, signal,
down when you're on your Wi-Fi network or any Wi-Fi network,
more info,
you have the more info.
forget this network, Wi-Fi, back, forget this network, auto join, switch button, password, low data mode, switch button, low data mode helps reduce, private Wi-Fi address, switch button, on.
So there's your
Double tap to
private
toggle setting.
Wi-Fi address. So you can turn it off if you need to.
Wi-Fi address 368. Using the private address helps reduce tracking. Limit IP address tracking. Switch limit IP address tracking.
So here's the
Switch
other
button
thing.
on. Double tap to toggle
IP
setting.
address tracking. This is another thing you can turn on or turn off. So these are things to consider. But as Cliff pointed out, sometimes, if you don't want your MAC address to constantly change, especially like on your home network, if you have like IP reservations and stuff set up specifically, on your network, you might want to turn it off at least for your network. So keep in mind that these settings are specific to the Wi-Fi network. In other words, if you turn it off on one network, it doesn't affect all of the other networks. So it can be done as a case by case sort of situation.
Wi-Fi back button.
I'm just going to go
Wi-Fi.
back here and
Ask to join. No networks will be joined. Settings back button.
go back
Settings.
here.
John
So
Panarese airplane Wi-Fi.
don't want to
Bluetooth,
end up going
cellular,
down
personal
a lot of
notification, SAP,
rabbit
focus,
holes
screen top,
here.
general, control
So I'm
center,
gonna kinda
display and
jump
home
around a
screen,
little bit.
accessibility, wallpaper, Siri insert, Face ID, emergency SO, exposure notif, battery, privacy and App Store, button, wallet and Apple, passwords,
Where
mail,
are you?
button,
Oh,
passwords, button.
This was what I was talking about earlier, where it keeps a database of all of your account passwords and user IDs for various websites and services. So again, if you double tap on that, you have to use Face ID or Touch ID or whatever the case may be to unlock that so that you can have access to view passwords and user IDs. And it's a list in alphabetical order. So that's the place when you use, for example, your keychain, whether you use iCloud keychain or just a normal keychain on a device, if you're not using iCloud keychain, that's the database that is added to or changed or whatever you want to call it.
Mail button.
So in mail,
allow mail to access heading. Siri and search button. Undo send delay. Sending heading. Messages created outside default account. Signature 8. But include attachments with increase quote level on. Mark addresses off. Always BCC myself. Composing heading. Blocked button. Blocked sender options. Muted thread action. Mark. Complete threads. On. Most recent message on. Collapse read messages. Organized by thread. On. Threading. Heading.
Just going
Follow
backwards
suggestions.
here.
On. Privacy protection. Button.
There's privacy protection for mail. So like I said, mail and Safari have different types of privacy.
Protect mail activity. On.
So
Double tap to toggle setting. Mail privacy protection works by hiding your IP address and loading remote content privately in the background, even when you don't open the message. This makes it harder for senders to follow your mail activity. Learn more. Link.
There's, everything has an explanation, and there's always a learn more link if you really want to get additional details. So, and Safari also has a similar situation where you can turn on. In fact, Safari has a privacy report that you can see when a page loads if you turn it on in settings under Safari, so that you can actually see if there's any attempts to track your browsing history. So again, this is all little things that Apple does for trying to protect
settings. Double tap to open
your privacy as you use Apple apps. Okay, so I'm going to, that's, basically the iOS stuff. Again, I'm not getting into specifics everywhere because we could spend another hour going through some individual privacy settings. But again, I highly recommend, if you're really interested or you really want to learn more about this stuff, there's a lot of knowledge-based articles that Apple has. And again, you can always contact me. I have some stuff bookmarked because it's stuff that, Cliff and I have to know as we go through the new Apple Certified Support Professional process to get, the new certification for Ventura and iOS 16. It's been a combined Mac and iOS. In the past, ACSP was specific to Mac, but they now call it the Apple Device Management process. It's still considered the ACSP certification, but now you have to know Mac and iOS. So a lot of this privacy stuff we have to kind of get into. So if anybody wants information, just shoot me an email and I can send you some specific links. So I'm going to go into the Mac side of security and privacy. And that is going to be found in, if you are running anything prior to Ventura, it's going to be called System Preferences. If you're running Mac OS 13 Ventura, it's going to be called System Settings. So there's two different layouts, but what you're going to be looking for in System Preferences is security and privacy. And the information that I'm going to kind of go over right now is going to be found in the privacy tab. So I opened up System Settings. So I'm going to
Row 38 expand General. Appearance, Accessible Control Center. Syrian Spotlight, Privacy and Security.
Privacy and Security. So I interacted with the table and I just hit the letter S for Siri because I know below that is Privacy and Security. I'm going to kind of stop
Out of table, vertical split, privacy and security, scroll area.
And I'm going to interact
Location
here.
services button.
So you kind of have a similar sort of situation here. So you have location services on the Mac side of things. Again, Find My with location services has to be turned on for Find My to work. So that also counts for iPhone and iPad as well. You can't have it both ways. Some people, again, those, the folks that are a little bit on the paranoid side, whatever you want to call it. I'll turn off location services so nobody can track me at all. That's fine. But then when you do that, a lot of your apps are not going to work properly, and Find My is not going to work properly. So that's why you have location services settings, so that you can customize and you can pick and choose the apps that you want that will be able to use location services.
Contacts button. Calendars button.
So in here, what we have in security and privacy is all of the apps that are, going to be accessing the operating system in some way, shape, or form. So I'm just VO right arrowing, and I want to just point out a few things as we go along here.
Reminders button, photos button, Bluetooth button, microphone button.
So there's the microphone settings. Again, it will show you a list of the apps that have either requested or you have given permission to allow access to the microphone. Now, remember that any of these apps, if you look at the information and you say to yourself, why is this app, allowed to use this particular feature, you can turn it off. You may have to put in a system password because you have to be an administrator of a Mac to make any security and privacy changes because it affects all users of the system. But, again, just to kind of emphasize the fact that you as the user have the ultimate power, so to speak, over what can and can't use your Mac's features.
Camera button.
Same thing with camera.
HomeKit button. Speech recognition button. Media and Apple Music button. Files and folders button. Full disk access button.
So full disk access is another one. You're going to get apps like Dropbox. And if you use Google Drive or OneDrive and other cloud services, you're going to get asked at some point during the installation. You're going to get a security dialog that's going to pop up that's going to ask you if you want to allow this app to have full disk access. So usually there's an OK button. So all you have to do is either say OK or no, no, I don't want that to happen. But again, you can always go back at any time and VO space on any of these buttons, and you'll find a table with a list of all of the apps that have either asked for permission or have your permission, and there'll be check boxes. So when you go through the table, it'll either say checked, meaning that it is being used, it's allowed to be used, or unchecked if it's not. So there are certain instances with apps where you are personally going to have to go in here and do it yourself. I wish I could say all apps make it easy where you simply have the cancel or OK button or allow or disallow buttons, but that's not always the case. Sometimes you just have a button that says open system settings, and what it will do, or open system preferences, and it will take you right to the privacy area, and you have to enable or disable yourself. So don't be afraid to come in here and be the commander of your ship and decide whether you want things to have access to these features or not. Accessibility is another one. You want to make, there are apps, believe it or not, you do have to give permission for accessibility to work with those apps. I think Dropbox is actually one of them, believe it or not. So, you want to take a look at all of these different
Focus button.
settings.
Accessibility button.
There's your accessibility.
Input monitoring button.
Input monitoring. This is another one that people overlook, but this is an area that basically allows apps to monitor your keyboard input. You may not think this is a big deal, but remember, keystrokes can be used against you. So you want to keep in mind what apps are actually being allowed if they're in that list, and you find it a little strange that a certain app is monitoring your input, you may want to disable it. But before you disable anything, make sure you have an understanding what you're going to do. What's the consequences of stopping something from working? Sometimes it's like, oh, this doesn't seem right to me. And then you disable it, and then you find out that you broke the app somehow because it actually needs that. So, you want to be, also be a little, make sure you educate yourself in some instances as to what, you're actually doing by turning something
Screen
off.
recording button. Passkeys access for web
So screen recording, certain apps like Zoom, you want to make sure are allowed to do screen recording.
Passkeys access for web browsers button. Automation button. App management button. Developer tools button. Analytics and improvements button.
So there's your analytics and improvements, just like we had in iOS to give permission to Apple for you to, report crashes for an app, or, for something happens in Mail, something happens in Safari, Apple gets notified that, and it doesn't understand when you report crash data to either Apple or a third-party developer, it doesn't come with your name on it. So it doesn't say it's from John Panarese's MacBook Pro 13M1 or John Panarese's Mac Mini 2019. It just is a sort of anonymous thing that just says it came from a MacBook Pro 13M1, but it doesn't have specific data as to, who it belongs to, et cetera, et cetera. They just need to know the device and model, just in case that the specific crash happens only with those particular, like maybe it's only Intel Macs it happens on, or maybe it's something that is happening specific to, the silicone Macs. So that's just something to understand, that it doesn't go with a label with your name when you send crash data. That's why it's called anonymous crash data, because it doesn't tie the data to your, you personally, your iCloud account or your account with that developer.
Apple advertising button.
So here's Apple advertising. This just gives you the information if you want to allow advertising and stuff to go or not. You have the same thing on the iDevice.
Heading security. Allow applications downloaded from App Store. Radio button. 1 of 2.
So here's your thing with the Mac for security.
Allow applications downloaded from App Store and identify developers. Selected. Radio button. 2 of 2.
This is, when you download third-party apps, this indicates what is allowed to actually run on your Mac. So identified developers and the App Store is the default, meaning that it doesn't necessarily have to be purchased through the Mac App Store. As long as the developer is someone recognized by Apple as being safe and authentic, you can run that app. If you get an app that is not, you as the administrator will get a warning, and you will find after this, if you VO right arrow, there would be an app or a couple of apps, whatever the case may be, that will, kind of warn you that this app may not be trusted, and you have to allow it to run on your Mac. And that's, again, a common sense choice of yours. Obviously, there may be apps that are perfectly safe. They just aren't notarized and code signed by Apple. Those are two, not to get again, go down rabbit holes here, but those are two security measures that Apple has for identified developers. They call it code sign or code signature, that Apple gives a developer to kind of let you know that this app is trusted. And it also gets notarized by Apple that it's a safe and recognized app that you can run safely on your Mac. Not all third-party developers get code signed or notarized, but that doesn't imply or infer that they are evil. It just means that they haven't decided to go through that process. So you, as the administrator of your Mac, can still allow those apps to run, and you have no issues with that. But you do have to be an administrator to allow access. So in other words, if you have kids who are using a computer and hopefully you set them up with standard accounts, they can't just haphazardly allow a third-party app to run on the Mac without you as the administrator, having a say in that.
Allow accessories to connect. Ask for new accessories. Allow accessories to connect pop-up button.
So again, this is also something you'll find on your iPhone as far as connecting. You want to make sure that it asks for permission before you connect an accessory to the Mac.
FileVault.
And, FileVault is the disk encryption that you can have. Basically people don't realize this, but iPhones, just by when you have passcodes and stuff enabled, they basically are encrypted, all your data on iPhones and iPads. The Mac M1s, M2s basically are encrypted. It's just that FileVault gives you an added layer of security as well. And it basically gives NSA level disk encryption to your system disk on your Mac. On M1 and M2s, it's really something you don't even notice because the login window is basically the same whether you have disk encryption turned on or off. It's just that Intel Macs have a different login window when you have FileVault enabled. And most cases, you might have to turn on VoiceOver manually. If you have FileVault on an Intel Mac, you are going to have to do Command F5 or use the Command key with the power button 3 times if you're still using a touch bar Mac. That's an Intel model.
FileVault turn off button. FileVault secure warning. FileVault is turned. The recovery key has been set. Lockdown mode turn on button.
And then you have the lockdown mode, just like you have on your, in iOS. If you feel that there's something, bad going on.
Lockdown mode is an extreme, optional protection that should only be used if you believe you may be personally targeted by a highly sophisticated cyber attack. Most people are never targeted by attacks of this nature. When Mac is in lockdown mode, it will not function as it typically does. Applications, websites, and features will be strictly limited for security, and some experiences will be completely unavailable.
There's a good little summary. You can do better than me trying to explain it right there from Apple. So just to kind of explain what lockdown mode is, and only turn it on if you really feel like you're being targeted. And that's, an important thing to understand is when something is truly going on, it's a little bit kind of off topic, but to kind of give you an example, I work with a local client from Helen Keller Services, my contract with HKNC, and she turned on voice control with her iPhone without realizing she did it. And I don't know if anybody's experienced having voice control turned on. It doesn't play nice with VoiceOver. She thought her phone was either possessed by the devil or that some kind of government entity was somehow controlling her phone. And I kid you not, she wanted me and my driver, my friend's wife, to take the phone to the local church to have a priest bless it because she thought that it might be possessed by the devil. And when I kind of tried to explain without insulting her that that's probably not the case, then she thought that, well, then it's got to be the government. They got to be controlling my phone. And I tried to explain to her kindly that that wasn't the case and that you would know if your phone was taken over by some other entity. It would be a lot more, different than what she was experiencing. But again, if you feel like you are somehow being targeted, then lockdown mode is your safe bet. But I don't know of anybody, at least in my personal experience, that's ever needed to go to that extreme.
Learn more. Heading Others. Extensions button.
So, then you
Profiles button.
You have extensions,
Advanced
profiles. Profiles are only usually used in situations where you might work for a company or be involved in a school district. You might be a teacher or, some kind of a worker for a school where everybody's Mac or iPhone gets a profile, meaning that system settings are all unified for every single device, and it's done through a profile. So everything gets automatically set up the way the administrator wants it to be. So that might be like their Wi-Fi network. It might be an enterprise network or something like that. They may have restrictions on for what types of apps you can download. Remember that screen time is a way, it used to be called parental controls, but it is now called screen time. So you can, basically, if you're, managing either people in a business or school situation or your kids in a family situation, you can control what they are allowed to do, how much time they can spend on the computer, what they're allowed to visit, what websites, who they're allowed to speak to through messages. So you have a lot of flexibility if you are either an administrator for a school or a company, or you are a parent managing children, or your nephews, nieces, whatever your responsibility as a guardian might be. So just things to understand that you can do with your Mac and your iPhone or an iPad for somebody who's younger who may not be wise as to the types of things in the world that can happen to them. So, again, you have all these different security and privacy settings on both your Mac and your iPhone, but there is a lot of advantages to being in the Apple ecosystem using the same, operating, because Mac OS and iOS are basically brother and sister at this point. You're getting to the point where the operating systems are being, basically streamlined. You have the situations on the Silicon Macs where you can run iPad apps on them. So, there is, as I said, I'm not trying to sell people on Macs, but if you're, using VoiceOver on an iPhone, you're going to find the Mac to be a very advantageous in a lot of ways, especially when you include the iCloud part of the equation and making your world a lot easier. I mean, for me, it's beautiful. I mean, I'm up in Buffalo staying at my brother's right now, but I have complete access to everything I need from my business, through iCloud Drive, my calendars, my contacts. So it's like I don't miss a beat. But there you have it. There you have the security and privacy. Let's open the floor to anybody who wants to ask questions.
I have a question about the keychain.
Yes.
Said that they do encrypt, because a lot of times I keep all of my passwords. I put them in several different places. I have them on, some in my notes. I'll have them on my other computer, my iPad. I put some, I write, I have them in different places because you never know if you're going to lose something that has these passwords, these thousands of passwords, and it's not literally 1,000, but you have to have different passwords. But the keychain, I have been a little hesitant about putting my passwords in there because I am leery that some way those passwords, somebody might have access to all of my passwords being placed in the keychain. So you're saying, and I know it is up to me as the the holder of the iPhone or the iPad or my Mac computer, but is that really a good idea to have all of your passwords loaded into this one place?
Well, let me first take a step back here. So you have two keychains. If you turn on iCloud keychain, that makes first of all, the data is encrypted end to end. So it's not like it's like floating around out there and somebody can just
it's
use
military grade.
Yes, it's really that sophisticated. So what iCloud keychain basically does, the advantages to iCloud keychain is that everything is available on all your devices, your passwords, if you want to put a credit card that if you do a lot of online shopping to make it easier for yourself, but you can have only a login keychain on a specific device. So either a Mac or an iDevice. If you don't turn on iCloud keychain, you still can have that information saved, but it's only specific to that device. So in other words, if you go to, I don't know, whatever website or your banking website, and you do it on your Mac and you save it to your Mac's keychain, if you go to that same website on your iPhone, it's not going to be able to access that information unless you have iCloud keychain turned on. Mm-hmm. So that's the difference between the two. But in either case, understand that it's encrypted. Apple just doesn't leave it out there hanging, whether it's on the local device or not. You're still protected by encryption. As Cliff said, it's basically military grade, Department of Defense grade security. I think it's considered AES 128-bit encryption or something like that.
The other thing that it provides is you having to look up that password when you want to log in, because you have the ability to autofill with Face ID, Touch ID, or your device password. So.
Right. And that's an advantage because, let's face it, we have enough trouble trying to remember, picking up milk from our shopping list, let alone, a password for a website that you may not visit on a regular basis.
Right. And this is one other question, and it may be exactly the same thing that you're talking about. But when you go on to the different sites or apps that you utilize, even your banking or other places, when you put in your password, it'll say, do you want to save this password?
Yeah, that's asking you if you want to save it in your keychain, so you won't have to do it again.
And you don't have to. Yeah, and you don't have to. If you feel that you're nervous about that, you just say no. But then keep in mind that anytime you go to that site, you're going to have to fill it in. You know?
You have to put it in. Okay, I just wanted to make sure because I didn't know if it was the same thing as the iCloud keychain, or if it was specific to that app and they have the responsibility.
Oh, no.
No.
Could you go a little bit deeper with FileVault? That's just on the Mac, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So basically,
you recommend that
if you travel with your computer, I highly recommend it. Even if it's an M1 or an M2, it gives an added layer of, security to your system. I mean, Apple already encrypts the hardware and stuff with the M1 and M2s, but, it's basically giving, again, it's NSA level. I think it's actually 256-bit encryption to your Mac. And on an M1 and M2, you really don't notice a difference because it's a unified login window, meaning that even if you don't use FileVault, it's the same login window. So it just means that you as the user, you just have that added layer of security. Now, what you want to do if you consider it is there's two ways when you set up FileVault, not to kind of, again, go down a rabbit hole here, but you need a recovery key just in case, for God, whatever knows the reason, you forget your system password and, your login password to your computer. Your best bet is to allow your Apple ID as your recovery key. So this way, when worse comes to worse, hopefully you're not going to forget your Apple ID and password. The other option is a generated recovery key. Now, the problem with this is it's like a 20-character alphanumeric combination, and then you're responsible for that key. One of the stupid things that people do is they save it as a file on the computer that's using FileVault. So if you
that you can't access,
you can't access it if you can't unlock the disk. And I just want to emphasize that, if you travel with your computer, you probably want to use FileVault. But if you have like a desktop in your home and you're pretty secure about it, it's not necessary. Some people will still do it anyway.
Just what you were mentioning about downloading apps that are not approved by Apple, that are not secure. And maybe I'm one of those paranoid people that Cliff was talking about, you were talking about. But if I don't use an Apple certified application, if I don't download that, then I am ensured that the application that I download will work, since it is certified by Apple. Otherwise, maybe some updates, maybe will run well the first time, but when there are updates that do not comply with any updates of the Apple, wouldn't that affect the performance or create a problem?
If an app falls out of, like, let's say the developer gets lazy or stops, developing the app, you will eventually get an incompatibility message. So what happens is you either get a message that says, hey, this is not known to be a safe app to use, and you'll get the option of sending it right to the trash, or you simply just don't use the app. But, you'll get a quarantine dialog with an app that may be missing either code signature or a notarization. And that doesn't mean it's a bad app. Don't get me wrong. That wasn't what I was trying to say, because there are apps that will still get flagged and get the quarantine message. It's just that you as the administrator have to allow it to run, and you only have to do it once. It's not like every time you open that app, you're going to constantly be harassed to say, okay, but just be advised that, if you end up downloading something and you're like, what the heck is this? And I didn't say this in the actual lesson, because I don't know, I'm not going to assume here, but porn is the biggest culprit for getting malware and viruses on a Mac, because there are plugins and stuff that often need to be downloaded for you to get to access that content. And people don't realize that this is exactly how nefarious, stuff can be put on your computer. And, people ask me about the Mac. Well, do you need virus protection? Do you need virus protection? And my answer to them is, if you are a smart user, again, not to keep beating the dead horse, common sense, you won't need it. Because if like with a Mac, you basically have to invite anything bad onto your system. It's not like Windows, where you can open an attachment and all of a sudden you have, ransomware taking over your computer. It doesn't happen that way on a Mac. You have to put your system password in to grant access, or you have to give access to something through the allow button. So in the end, if you do something to your Mac as the user, it's your fault. Apple has done everything it can to protect the operating system, using SIP and things like that. But, ultimately, you as the user, and that's why only system administrators can be allowed to grant access, because you don't want your kid, downloading some wacky game that, might have malware on it. I will catch you guys in a couple of weeks. And as I said, those of you who want the file, just, drop me a line. Until next time, thank you very much, guys.
Remember, for all Mac, iOS, and any kind of Apple training, visit macfortheblind.com. John Panarese has some free courses and some reasonable paid courses. You won't be disappointed. See you next time.